In an HDB flat at Block 58, Bahru, Singapore, the Tan family of 6 lived a quiet, harmonious life. The head of the household, 36-year-old Tan Quinn Chai, and his wife, 32-year-old Lieming, earned their living running a small school bus. He drove while she collected fares, and each morning they would follow their familiar route, picking up and dropping off students in the neighborhood. The family was regarded as kind, hardworking, and happy. But on January 6, 1979, their lives would be forever shattered in one of Singapore's most brutal crimes. That Saturday morning, despite it being the weekend, elementary school students still had to attend classes. Around 6:35 a.m., after a quick breakfast, the Tan couple kissed their 4 sleeping children and quietly left home to begin their shift. Like many working parents of that time, they had no choice but to leave their children alone, locking the door behind them. The Tan children were eldest son Tan Kok Ping, 10, a 5th grader; Tan Kok Hin, 8, in 2nd grade; Tan Kok Soon, 6, in 1st grade; and the youngest, daughter Tan Chin Ni, just 5 years old. The boys all attended Bendemeer Road Primary School nearby, while Chin Ni was set to begin kindergarten the following Monday. 15 minutes after leaving, at 7:10 a.m., Quinn Chai pulled the bus to the roadside while his wife phoned home, as she always did, to wake the children for school. This time, the phone rang unanswered. She reassured herself they were probably still asleep, and tried again later. Both she and her husband called multiple times during their rounds, but no one picked up. Growing uneasy, Li Ming asked a neighbor, Mrs. Tan, to check on them. From 8:30 to 9 a.m., the neighbor knocked persistently on their door, but only silence answered. The curtains were drawn tight, giving no view inside. Unable to reach the parents, this was long before mobile phones, she reluctantly went about her morning errands, intending to report back later. The Tans, unaware of this, continued their bus route until finishing work at 9:59 a.m. When they returned home, Li Ming unlocked the door and instantly sensed something was wrong. The children's school bags were untouched on the living room table, their shoes still neatly lined up. She moved toward the back of the flat, passing the kitchen, until she reached the bathroom, and froze, in horror. There, on the blood-soaked tile floor, lay her 4 children, lifeless and stacked upon one another, their small bodies mutilated with savage wounds. The couple collapsed, wailing in grief. Neighbors rushed in and immediately called the police. The first officer arrived at 10:04 a.m., and upon seeing the carnage, called for urgent backup. Soon, CID homicide specialists and forensic teams flooded the scene. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry. Both the wooden front door and iron security gate were intact. The living room and dining area were tidy, nothing ransacked, the fish tank undisturbed. But the bathroom revealed hell itself. The eldest boy, Kok Ping, was at the bottom of the pile, his right arm nearly severed, his left hand gripping strands of hair. Evidence of his desperate struggle. His younger siblings each bore over 20 slash wounds, their tiny bodies butchered mercilessly. The youngest, Chin Ni, still clutched a pillow in her arms, as if she'd been dragged from bed mid-sleep. Investigators concluded the killer used at least 2 knives, likely including a kitchen cleaver, and noted that a chopping knife was missing from the kitchen. Blood residue in the sink suggested the murderer had calmly washed up afterward. Nothing was stolen, indicating the motive wasn't robbery, but something far darker. Forensics estimated the murders occurred between 6:30 and 7:30 a.m., mere minutes after the parents had left. The lack of forced entry strongly suggested the killer was someone the children trusted, someone familiar with the family's routine, who waited for the exact moment the couple departed before striking. As one officer later said, "In my entire career, I had never seen anything so horrific." nothing else came close. The most pressing and tragic question investigators faced was this: who, among those acquainted with the Tan family, could harbor such intense hatred that they would slaughter 4 innocent children? A chilling rumor spread that a neighbor across the street had glimpsed little Chin-Ni bolting out of the bathroom, only to be dragged back inside by someone. At the time, the neighbors supposedly thought it was just parental discipline and dismissed it. Yet when police combed the neighborhood, interviewed every resident, and even made public appeals through the press, no such witness ever came forward. Whether Chin-Ni truly escaped remains a haunting mystery to this day. What was equally baffling was the silence surrounding the massacre. 4 children had been brutally butchered, each suffering dozens of stab wounds, yet not a single cry for help, no sounds of struggle, no shattering of objects were heard by neighbors. That eerie quiet made the crime even more terrifying. Because of its severity, the Criminal Investigation Department, CID, quickly formed a special task force of their most experienced detectives. Investigations began on multiple fronts simultaneously. Every scrap of evidence, hair strands, fingerprints, bloodstains, clothing, was carefully sealed and rushed to the laboratory. The hope was that scientific analysis would uncover a vital lead to the killer. The Tan couple themselves, along with hundreds of nearby residents, were summoned to CID headquarters for questioning. Investigators pressed the parents for details. What had they done that morning? What was their financial situation? And did they have any conflicts with relatives, neighbors, or acquaintances? Detectives quickly ruled out robbery, since nothing was stolen. The motive, they reasoned, had to be revenge. Yet both Quin Chai and Mei Ying insisted their lives had been peaceful. They had no enemies, no disputes. But Quin Chai did recall one troubling detail. That morning, they had rushed out and accidentally left the outer iron door unlocked. What's more, they had lost their house keys weeks earlier, but never changed the locks. This matched testimony from a neighbor, Mrs. Wu, who told police that about a month before the murders, Mei Ying had confided she lost her keys but never replaced them. If the killer had obtained those keys, it would explain why the locks were untouched. On January the 7th, the day after the crime, police summoned 2 female neighbors for questioning. Both had been involved in financial disputes with the Tan family. As it turned out, Mei Ying had run a mutual aid society, a type of informal community lending club common in Singapore at the time. Members contributed money and borrowed against the pool, but it was risky and often led to disputes. By modern standards, it would be considered illegal fundraising. Police discovered that 2 female members still owed Mei Ying significant sums, one over $1,000, the other over $3,000. Both had delayed repayment despite repeated demands. Rumors swirled that one woman had even quarreled heatedly with Mei Ying shortly before the murders. Could financial grudges have turned into vengeance? When reporters descended on the neighborhood, they found that police were especially focused on this angle. One of the questioned women, Mrs. Xu, lived across from the Tan apartment. When asked if she had heard screams or seen anything suspicious that morning, she claimed she had not. The other neighbor, Mrs. Fu, admitted more openly. She had joined Mei Ying's society after moving into the block 3 years earlier. She confessed she did owe money, about $100, not the thousands that rumors claimed, and acknowledged she had argued loudly with Mei Ying over repayment. But she insisted the quarrel was resolved, and their families had remained friendly. Even so, she revealed that police had asked her an unsettling question, something that suggested investigators were probing not only debts, but whether resentment over money could have escalated into murderous intent. Investigators widened their net of questioning, trying to make sense of scattered leads. Mrs. Fu, one of the women previously questioned, revealed that police had asked her a peculiar question: whether she had seen any charcoal sellers peddling their goods near the HDB block on the morning of the crime. She answered no, but the inquiry led her to believe investigators suspected such a vendor might have been linked to the murders. Over the following days, more than 100 residents in the surrounding blocks were interrogated. One elderly woman in her 60s, who often sat in the corridor chatting and keeping watch on daily activity, admitted she hadn't seen anything unusual that morning. She explained that around 8 a.m., she happened to be inside washing her hair, so no suspicious strangers had caught her eye. Another resident, Mrs. Tan, recalled a chilling encounter 5 days before the murders, on January 1st. Around 5 p.m., a young man knocked on her door. Her son nearly opened the iron gate before she intervened. Looking through the door, she spotted the man loitering suspiciously, holding 2 bottles in his hands. When she asked who had sent him, he muttered something about someone downstairs and quickly fled. She later reported the incident, unsure if it was connected. Mrs. Wu, a close friend of the family, told reporters that the Tans had once lived in Chinatown before moving to Guyang Bahru Road 4 or 5 years earlier. She insisted the couple, though occasionally arguing about child rearing, were affectionate and loving parents. In her eyes, Mei Ying was generous and kind-hearted, hardly someone who could provoke such deadly hatred. Another neighbor, who wished to remain anonymous, disclosed that the Tan home had once been the target of an attempted burglary. A man pretending to be a utility inspector had tricked the children into opening the door. When asked where the family's wallet was, the children said they didn't know. The intruder began rifling through drawers until a neighbor's child alerted adults, forcing the man to flee. One of the earliest mysteries was the strand of hair found clenched in the eldest son's fist. On January 11th, forensic testing confirmed it was the boy's own hair, not the killer's. Investigators puzzled over why he might have gripped his own strand so tightly, wondering if it had been torn in the midst of a desperate struggle. 8 days after the murders, on January 14th, a taxi driver stepped forward with potentially vital information. Around 8 a.m. on the morning of the crime, while passing HDB Block 96 on Gilang Bahru Road, he had picked up a nervous young man in his 20s. The passenger had bloodstains on his left side, looked pale and exhausted, and seemed terrified. When the mysterious young passenger got into the taxi, he leaned heavily against the door, panting as if he had run for his life. The driver, alarmed by the bloodstains on his left side, asked what had happened. The man replied he had been beaten. When they reached Lavender Road, the young man got out. As he did, the driver heard a metallic clang. Glancing back, he saw the hilt of a knife jutting from the man's pants. The sound had been the blade striking the door. Based on his accent and features, the driver believed the passenger was Malaysian. When asked to pick him out from a lineup, the driver unhesitatingly identified the Malaysian youth. To the shock of Tan Quenchai, the children's father, this was someone he knew. His neighbor from the very same HDB block. The young man often borrowed their phone, and the Tan children affectionately called him Uncle. Yet after 2 weeks of interrogation, police found no conclusive evidence. The suspect and his sister soon moved back to Malaysia, disappearing from sight. 2 weeks later, just as the couple reeled from grief, a New Year's card arrived. On the cover, happy children played. Inside, the message froze their hearts. Achai and Ang, your family line ends. Haha, the note was signed, the perpetrator. The phrase carried a cruel sting. After their youngest daughter's birth, Mei Ying had undergone sterilization surgery. How could anyone know such intimate details unless they were very close to the family? The Malaysian youth seemed a strong suspect. The blood on his left side matched the likely spray pattern from Kokping's nearly severed arm. The taxi driver's testimony was consistent and seemingly without motive to lie. Yet doubts lingered. Why had the driver waited 8 days to report his encounter, despite the case dominating every headline? If the young man truly was the killer, why risk boarding a taxi in broad daylight, visibly bloodstained, when he could have slipped quietly back into his own nearby flat? Most damning, the New Year's card was sent while the Malaysian youth was still in custody, making it impossible for him to have mailed it himself. Reporters pressed the Tan couple on whether they had enemies. They insisted they had none. Yet relatives hinted at earlier matters that Quenchai had failed to report to police, though what those matters were has never been revealed. Neighbors, meanwhile, described heartbreaking scenes. The couple eating quietly in their flat after the murders, still setting 4 pairs of chopsticks and bowls for the children who would never return. 4 years later, Mei Ying underwent surgery in hopes of reversing her sterilization. Miraculously, she became pregnant again. On October 30th, 1983, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. From then on, the couple withdrew from the spotlight, living quietly, rarely mentioned in the media again. The Tan children murder case remains one of Singapore's most brutal and unsolved crimes. Decades later, speculation continues. Was the Malaysian youth truly guilty, or merely a convenient suspect? Who sent the taunting New Year's card, with details only an insider could know? Did the Tan couple themselves know the identity of the killer, yet stay silent out of fear? To this day, the questions remain unanswered. What is certain is that 4 young lives were cut short in the most horrific way, leaving a shadow over Singapore's history and a mystery that may never be solved. What do you think about this case? Could the neighbor have been the killer? Or was someone closer to the Tan family involved? Stay close to your loved ones and keep them safe. Thank you for watching.